Race weekend in one of Formula One's oldest and most unique tracks on the F1 calendar and ever to be presented in Formula One, the Monaco Grand Prix. The history in Monaco is rich, famous for delivering moments and just excitement on its race weekend. And while we don't get many overtakes, the moments and the memories we get from Monaco are timeless. The track has been here since the start of Formula One, with a moment coming in 1955 where Ascari sent him and his Formula car into the water. It's times like this that I wish we had a video of this moment and quite the crazy thing that happened on the only track that can have something like this happen for. In 1996, we had a race where there were only 3 finishers, so literally the podium was your finishing grid on the Monaco GP. You can't tell me that is not exciting to think that is a possibility in even nowadays Formula cars. With the track being so close and slippery weather forecasted for this weekend, sometimes crazy stuff like this can happen that can't happen on other tracks on our calendar. That race winner was Oliver Panis, with David Coulthard and Johnny Herbert being the only 3 finishers in the race. In 2006, we had Michael park it up to get that pole position, which we ended up finding out about his parking up antics. But in that race, we had an even more iconic moment with Kimi having his race cut short, parking it up, and going on his yacht chilling for the rest of the Monaco GP. Then we had some iconic moments from Ricciardo, who ended up actually winning here, but had a pit stop nightmare in 2016 that took away his victory. We ended up seeing another pit stop nightmare here from Bottas in the following years. In a track where strategy is so important, this could make or break your race. We ended up seeing him get redemption in 2018, which was that victory that he had, where the car could not shift up into 7th and 8th gear and was stuck in 6th, defending Sebastian Vettel for plenty of laps. It was a beauty and a thriller to watch. But then we had the 2023 Monaco qualifying, with Max taking pole position in the last second from Fernando Alonso, who was pushing to the ends with that car. Some people call this the best qualifying we've ever had in history, and to what I have watched, it's the best qualifying by far. The walls are close, balls to the wall. You gotta have heart to race in Monaco properly and to be quick here. It's a driver-dependent circuit, and one of the drivers that was unstoppable here in his time, still remembered for driving that car through the Monaco streets with a manual shifter in a Formula car at that time, balls to the wall, was Senna. Senna has raced in Monaco 10 times, from his Toleman car all the way to his McLaren car, and guess what? His average finishing position in Monaco was 1.38, meaning this guy was practically just winning there. Now, he did have an accident happen in 1988, which stopped his race, and in 1985 his engine blew out. But other than that, 6 victories in Monaco, a P3 in 1986, and a P2 in a super slow car from P13 in the Toleman in 1984. He even started in grid positions P3 and P3 in 93 and 92 and still finished the race in number 1. This will always be remembered as the Senna track. And with it being the Senna track, we get a beautiful livery to go along with it from McLaren. And I have to say, I'm in love with this livery. Some of my favorite colors, green and yellow, going along with his helmet, but also the Brazilian flag. It's a thing of beauty. I think this is better than us actually getting that red, white, and blue iconic McLaren livery. Some people probably don't feel the same, but this is a complete tribute to Senna himself, and I think they did a great job. It's going to be so nice to see a yellow car on the grid, fully colored like it is, and it's a very quick car that has a potential victory at hand here in Monaco, so why not bring a beautiful SmackDown livery? Going over the preview for Monaco, we go from a C5 to a C3, the softest tires here, and if you ask me what would make this track perfect and actually much more raceable, is if you just cancel out the C3 hard tire. Make that a tire that's not accessible in the race. Make it a mandatory 2-stop, only C4, C5. That would make it a lot more fun. With the tires dying out, that would make a more interesting strategy. We'd see a lot of positions change. Would it mean for more overtakes? No, because we need smaller cars. But it would make a fun strategy battle, and it wouldn't guarantee a pole position at victory. The track is going to have a whole bunch of traction. Downforce is going to be at a 5 maxed out, and track evolution is super important here. It's why we saw Max end up actually taking P1 in that qualifying. That wasn't the sole reason, he drove his heart out, but as the rubber goes into that asphalt, it makes the track go faster and faster, and the later you can put in your lap, the better it will be for you. There's not much tire stress here. As I mentioned, we will see a one stop here. That is pretty much a promise, but with some rain incoming, we could see much more than a one stop. Last year, we had that crazy rain. Even with Max going a little bit into the wall, Alonso goes a little bit past the track as well. It was interesting, and they made the wrong decision on the intermediates, which Aston Martin will probably remember for the rest of their lives. Otherwise, Alonso would have had a victory, and Max would have ended up becoming P2, but they made the mistake, which resulted in Alonso finishing P2, which was still a crazy position. Driver confidence is key here, but let's go over a lap in the historic Monaco GP. We start the lap at the start-finish line going into turn 1, where it's very important that you're perfect on the braking and you go steady on the throttle out of turn 1 to get a perfect launch into that straight. This is very important for lap time. A lot of tenths can be made up here, and commitment is everything. Going into that straight, we're now going to go into 2, 3, 4. This sector is very important on threading the throttle. You want to be very careful here, but as much throttle as you can get between 3 and 4 is important, and making that turn into 4 perfectly without hitting that tree bump that is there going into 5, which will result us into sector 2. Now sector 2 is tricky. These are the slowest corners on our F1 calendar, and a lot of lap time can be made and lost between 6 and 7, one of the slowest chicanes on our calendar. And then going into 8, you got to have the perfect launch to get good traction and step on the throttle as hard as you can to go into 9 into that tunnel, which will then get us into this weird, tricky 10 and 11 corners where commitment on the brakes is most important. This sector is all about commitment and hitting those corners on the perfect apex. But now going into that last sector 3 after turn 12, which is another tricky corner, but more of a medium speed that we don't really see here in Monaco. Now sector 3 results in some of the best angles we'll ever see of Formula 1 cars and the most commitment we'll see from our drivers getting as close as possible to the wall. A beauty to see. 13 and 14 goes into 15 and 16. The angles here are ridiculous, and the margin of error here is minimal. But then 17 into 18, braking commitment is so important here. Max ended up getting pole only because of this. His commitment into 18 and then 19 was an absolute beauty. And while Alonso didn't have the best sector 3, Max was incredible in a very difficult sector, which then ends up getting us into our only DRS zone into sector 1. This DRS doesn't really play a factor here anyways, but that is your start finish, and that is a lap around the historic Monaco GP. Let's get into my top 5 drivers, top 3 teams, and the 3 worst teams going here. Not gonna lie to you, I'm very back and forth with the top 5 drivers. As for the best 3 teams, not too much to discuss. Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull should be the best 3 teams here, regardless of whether it's driver dependent. They are the best cars, and the overall max downforce on those cars should be peaked out a little bit higher than the rest of the teams. The teams that won't do so high here, it's a real toss-up between pretty much any of them except for those top 3 because it is driver commitment here. I'm going to throw in Williams. I think this is not going to be a great track for them, if not one of their worst tracks here. Sauber is going to go in there as well, and I have a feeling Haas is not going to be great here as well. I think Alpine and RB are going to be a little bit better here, not by much, but I think the car makes a tad bit difference here, at least for those bottom 3 teams. But now going into the top 5 drivers, I'm very conflicted on who I want to put in the top 5. It's very driver dependent. Don't look too much into, oh, Red Bull's stronger here, oh, Aston Martin's weaker here. It's much more on how much the drivers can commit into qualifying and where they will start. I do think victory here is a toss-up for sure between the top 3 teams, but at number 5, I'm going to put Fernando Alonso. I think after 2 bad weekends, which on Miami wasn't too bad of a weekend, but Imola was very far from the Fernando that we know. He will finish P5 here. I do think they're going to improve the car. I just don't think they have that little bit of pace that they'll need to pass these top 3 cars. I do think Fernando's going to put in a stunking lap though. We're going to see a beauty from Fernando. That will get him up to P5 if everything results correctly. In P4, we're going to see Lando Norris. Now this might come as a shock to you guys, but I just think there's going to be these 3 drivers that I think are somehow going to top Lando in the qualifying and then in the race. So for me, Lando's going to end up finishing in P4, and I am basing this off of what I think they're going to finish in qualifying. If I went along with pit stops and wet weather that might possibly come. There's so many different outcomes. So I'm just going off of what I think is going to happen in qualifying, which will result in the race result. Now from P3 to P1, stick with me here. I'm going to put in P3 Oscar Piastri. I think he's going to beat out Lando in qualifying. This track doesn't really matter on tires, which has been his only weak point throughout this season and the last. And he's had that little bit of tiny edge in qualifying over Lando, but definitely not in the race. But this is where qualifying matters. So P3 for Oscar. And P2, I'm putting in Max, regardless of what this track says. Leclerc is going to break the curse. I just have this feeling that this is going to be Leclerc's race weekend to win. Even with the Ferrari car having trouble firing up its tires, I believe that they can do it. And Leclerc has had pole position here multiple times, but this time he's finishing it in P1. It's a toss-up. Honestly, I could go a lot of ways. I can even go with Oscar winning. I even thought of that at some point, but Leclerc is the one that I'm kind of inching towards right now. Max could easily take the victory here as well. He put in one of the best laps I've ever seen in 2023, and now in Imola, that lap was amazing as well, even with the tow. And with the car that's better in slow corners than it was last year, Max will be very deadly here. But I think the top 5 might be solidified for me. Maybe Carlos could be up there instead of Fernando. Maybe Lewis ends up getting some of that form back that he used to have in like the McLaren days. And that one crazy lap he put in when Niki Lauda passed, that was an amazing lap by Lewis. I just don't think it's been his track lately, but it's very possible Lewis puts himself in here. It's a toss-up between so many teams, so many drivers. Yes, the race isn't that exciting, but qualifying makes up for it. And it's personally one of my favorite race weekends of the year. Regardless of what people say, it's unique in itself. That's what I love about Monaco, and it needs to stay on the calendar. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.